Okay, you have 4 more minutes to finish your test. Hurry up.
That's impossible.
No, I'm not even close to being done.
Well, better get going.
Oh my gosh, focus more. Couple minutes.
Okay, I'm kidding. Oh my gosh, you guys are lame.
Good evening. There's no way that we have any teachers at Glasshouse that would ever do that, right? I don't think so. It'd be a good little fun joke sometimes, but I thought we'd just start with something a bit fun to lighten the mood. Welcome everyone. My name is Rob Steffler. I'm the Dean of Studies here at GCC, and I have the privilege of delivering to you a huge amount of information in 1 hour that you're probably going to, especially if this is your first time through senior school with your child, you're probably going to forget all of it. But that's okay, because we're recording the session, so all of the resources, the recording, the information will be available to you over the next while before we have to make any big decisions. So I can't really see because of the light, but can I get a show of hands? How many of you already have a child in senior school, parents? Oh, a fair few. So I don't have to say much. You guys know it all then, yeah? You're sorted? So it looked like about half. So that means about half of you have heard some version of what we're going to talk about tonight, and half of you haven't. And so I'm going to try to make it as entertaining as possible and as short and sweet as possible, but there is a lot of information. At the end of the night, there's going to be opportunity for questions and conversations, and my email is always open if you need to ask something after tonight, as well as the other staff members that are here. So we're going to get to it. You saw the agenda. Where did we go? No, we're not going to watch that again. I want to start with a bit of our vision for your students, because I think this conversation is interesting when it happens across all schools around this time of year. And I want to just propose to you that sometimes schools focus on one thing, and that isn't necessarily the thing that's going to allow your young person to have the best outcome in senior school. And that one thing is the score that they get at the end of year 12 that we call the ATAR. It's important for some, you could say it's important for many, but sometimes we get confused that that's the goal, regardless of who the young person is, what their interest areas are, what they're passionate about, what they think they want to do. So I want to frame this a little bit differently tonight, in that you can see on this slide here, ATAR is one pathway, but it's one of a few pathways that we offer at Glasshouse. And I want to frame our decision-making process for year 10 and senior school in this context of, look at the number of hours that a young person is going to spend over the next 3 years. Those hours do not include extracurricular, co-curricular. That is just the number of hours that your young person will study 5 to 6 subjects, depending on how many subjects they choose, right? It's the equivalent of a year to a year and a half's worth of full-time work. And so, I don't know, I like putting it in that frame, because I'd like to think that if you're going to work on something for a year and a half, the equivalent of a year and a half full-time work, you want something out of that. Would that be a fair comment to make, parents? You'd like a return on that young person's time, yeah? And I think sometimes when all we do is focus on this score that we call the ATAR, we actually miss the opportunity to add value to a young person's senior pathway, right? So I want to just get you to be thinking about the fact that at GCC, we want our senior students, the pathway they choose, we want it to really matter. And we're sort of past the time where, when I went to university, it meant higher pay, better job. Some parents who are maybe my age or older would have a similar perspective on that. You went to university because it was a higher pay and better job. And we're just seeing the trend very clearly that that isn't the case anymore. And so university is a great pathway to take, And you should totally take it if it's something that you really want to do, or it leads to something that you really want to do. And so, but I think we need to be careful in directing kids down a certain pathway if it's not going to lead to a better outcome for them. And so I like this framing, because it says we want our young people to work hard. They're going to put in thousands of hours of work, and whatever they put that time into, we want it to pay off in the end. And just getting an ATAR score and a QCE isn't necessarily it shouldn't be the only goal. It might be a goal, but it shouldn't be the only goal. And there's lots of other things that we can do. And so when we talk about pathways at Glasshouse, we're talking about a whole bunch of options that all lead to really exciting opportunities. So I think that's a good way to start the evening. We often think that we're going to make a choice for year 10, 2027, and we're just going to follow this upwards curve of success. And we would all agree that that is very rarely the case. And we go on this quite messy journey of figuring out what works and what doesn't, what we like and what we don't like. And we end up in the same place eventually. Just takes a little bit of a messier path. And so we want to share with you tonight a bunch of information about year 10 specifically. We're actually going to share with you the 2027 subject lines tonight, because we're in a position to do that. And the process that we're going to take over the next few weeks to get to a point where the year 10s for 2027 make a subject selection in about 4 weeks' time, maybe 5 weeks' time, depending on how well we go with what we need to do between now and then. But then we're going to share a little bit about the senior system. We're going to watch a 3-minute video. Those of you who have a young person who's already in senior school will have seen some of this. It's always good to refresh. And then we're going to finish the evening with an opportunity for you to ask a whole bunch of questions and have conversations. We've got some heads of department. We've got our Future Pathways team. And we feel like between the 7 of us that are here tonight, we can probably answer 99% of your questions. So let's get started. If you didn't know how the senior timetable works, it is different from year 9. So we have 6 subjects that students take in senior school. They do an English, a maths of their choice, and then they do 4 electives. And all of those are 6 lessons each. Everybody does religion and ethics for 2 lessons, and everyone has a pastoral care lesson. And that takes us to our 40 lessons in the week. That's what the senior timetable looks like. And what we want to do in year 10 is make sure that whatever students are studying, they are essentially testing the waters and making sure that that's where they want to be. And so it's totally okay to get a bunch of chopping and changing through year 10 as we're testing the waters and trying subjects, especially if they're subjects that aren't offered in middle school. And so our whole goal of year 10 is to play and figure out what we like, figure out what we don't like. And we get to the end of year 10 and we make some decisions about what we think we want to continue. And then we play again in year 11, but we hopefully aren't making as many changes because we're starting to figure out what we want to do. And by the end of term 3, year 11, we lock in. Because when we start making changes in year 12, it can sometimes lead to not getting the accreditations that you were hoping to get, right? Okay. We have 3 groups of offerings for senior school. And depending on what, particularly with the certificate courses, depending on when they start, some of these offerings start in the beginning of year 10 and run right through. Some of them start in year 11 and run in year 11 and 12. So I love it because there's so many opportunities for students to study the things that they're most interested in. You can do a certificate course, which is a bunch of practical learning in most cases, but it leads to a qualification that you can then go out and employers are looking for. You can do an applied subject, which contributes to your Queensland Certificate of Education and involves really practical hands-on work. Or if you're academically inclined and you love the academic work, you can study all academic subjects, or you can study a combination of all 3. Okay, so we really are excited about the programs that we can now offer in senior school, particularly to this cohort of year 10s who will be in year 10 next year, because some of these offerings are new And so we'll talk about that too. I'm going to invite Mr. Castleman, our head of senior school, up on to stage to talk about some funding changes, because you would have all got a letter, an email about some funding changes, and it was a ton of information. You probably went a bit brain dead trying to figure all that out, but we thought it was worth putting it in front of you live and having a little bit of a conversation about it too. So Mr. K is going to share with us on that.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is so amazing to see you. It's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces. And some of the students in here I met in grade 2 when they were in my wife's class. So it is amazing to see you as well. I feel really old because you are now on the verge of coming to senior school. And senior school, for many students, is the best time of their schooling. They really enjoy it. Way more freedoms, but also way more responsibility. And this is where we get you ready to tackle the big old world. And I'm always so incredibly proud of our senior students, and I tell them quite often what an exceptional group of young people we are growing. And I had a conversation with Rob the other day, and I said, what we really want to do is grow godly, good people who do good things. And I'm sure this is what you would desire for your child as well. Now, when we are talking about general subjects, they are the ones that you are very familiar with. Your applied subjects are very much hand-on subjects that are presented by the QCAA. And we report all of these back to the Queensland Curriculum and Assessment Authority. But an additional pathway that we've created is these certificate courses. Now, what used to happen is that the government would have 2 buckets of funding. One bucket of funding for apprenticeships and traineeships, one bucket of funding for certificates. And you used to be able to dip into both at the same time. And last year, I spoke to the Future Pathways team, and they said to me, are you aware of the changes that are going to happen? I said, I have no idea. And they informed me that the government was actually changing the rules under the promise that they're going to make it much easier. But now what's happened is you can only dip into one of those buckets of funding at a time. So if you want to do an apprenticeship or a traineeship, that comes out of one bucket of funding, but you can't use the certificate bucket of funding called VETIS. This is VET in schools, which is vocational training. Or you can use the VETIS funding, but you can't necessarily then do your apprenticeship. And what we want to do, the Future Pathways team is amazing. They will point you in the right direction to use that VETIS funding or traineeship or apprenticeship funding in the correct way to get maximum benefit out of it. So each student know that the government has got a certain amount of money attached to you that they want to use to help you do something that will give you a certificate and a boost in life. That's the beauty of Australia. Grab it when you can. So on the next page, if you'll open that for me, Mr. Steffler, we've worked out a way to actually make it affordable, because now that we can dip only into one of the 2 buckets at a time, you would want to maximize where you use your funding. We will still keep funding all the teachers, all the classrooms, everything that your student needs, the bus out to the farm, if that is what needed. The college will fund all of this, but we've got an additional cost for the registered training organizations, or RTOs, and we have to pay them a certain amount of money. So that amount of money is the only contribution we are going to ask parents to help us with. And that contribution, we still fund all the rest, can be broken up per fortnight, per month, over a year, or over 2 years, what best pleases you. And what will happen is our fees team will be able to assess you with that. Now, when you choose a subject, and it is a certificate course, you go and you tick that certificate course, and you say, my child would like to attend this certificate course. The moment you tick that box, we go and we pay the whole amount upfront to the provider, and all you have to do is just that little bit that comes off every month, comes out of the school fees. It's not an additional payment. It just goes into the lump sum of your school fees and comes off little bit by little bit. One of the big problems with this is once you've chosen a certificate, you have to follow it all the way through. The reason is the RTO will not give us the money back once we've paid it. So young people, before you use that VETAS funding, make sure that this is what you really want to do. Because once you sign up, you have to finish it. And what's great is if you do a certificate 2, 3, or 4, right at the end, you walk out of high school, not just with your Year 12 certificate, but also with a certificate that employees would love to see, because it says, I am smart, I can do stuff. Right? And that's what every employer wants to see, someone who is smart and can do stuff. So it is an exceptional opportunity. If you want to ask any questions about this later, you are more than welcome to do so. Mr. Steffler is going to speak to you just in a moment about how to do your subject selection.
Okay, so you can see on the list here, this is all of the offerings in senior school at Glasshouse Christian College. And I've color coordinated it. I've split it up into the things you have to take and then the electives by the type of course it is. So you can see that the English and the maths is there, and every student chooses an English and a maths on the English and the maths line. And then all the rest of the subjects are the electives. You can choose 4 of them, okay? I'm going to come back to the funding with regards to certificate courses when we look at the lines, because I think to have an example in front of you actually allows us to talk about how that funding works, and hopefully those of you who are going, well, how do I use the VETAS funding versus what am I paying for, we'll clear that up, okay? So those are all the subjects we offer in senior school. That doesn't mean that all of those subjects run every year. So it's really important that we understand that we run subjects based on them being viable to run. You can imagine that running a subject with 2 kids is very difficult, and actually it's a child safety issue, because if one's away, then you've got one child in a classroom, and we can't do that. So we need to make sure that things are viable. Generally speaking, Mr. Curtis likes to see 10 students in a class for it to be viable, but we make decisions every year, not just around on paper what makes it viable, but what's best for this cohort. And so we'll often run subjects that have slightly lower numbers as well. It's just important that you understand that because these are on the page doesn't mean that they're absolutely guaranteed. It is based on the final numbers for each class, for each subject that we offer once we do the selection. You'll hear this document being referenced all the time in senior school. So if you're new to senior school, just remember that there is a guide that we follow for senior school. It's called the QC Handbook. It's available on the QCAA website, but this is the Bible of senior school. Right? And so when it comes to making decisions pretty much about everything, we reference this document because it's the thing that gives us the guidelines, and it's the thing that we have to follow, particularly in year 11 and even more so in year 12, especially when it comes to assessment. Let's say students being absent for assessment, how we deal with missed assessment, all of those things, how we deal with plagiarism, how we deal with inappropriate use of AI when it comes to assessment, how we deal with a student who was in a car accident the morning of an assessment, all of those things, it's all in this handbook, and there's guidelines around how schools make decisions. So just please be aware that this is an important handbook for us, and you'll hear us reference it to you. It's a pretty boring read, so I wouldn't expect any of you to go out and ever read it unless you really, really needed to for some reason. On to the information that's probably going to be a bit of an overload for you if you've never heard it before. And this is, what are we getting at the end of year 12 from a paperwork perspective. And I already mentioned this ATAR score that some students will get if it's the best pathway for them, but not all students will get an ATAR, and that is, it's a bit of a stigma still, unfortunately, that somehow if I'm not getting an ATAR, it's not as good as if I was getting an ATAR, and we just need to throw that whole stigma out the window because it's just simply not true. So some students will get an ATAR. We're hoping that all of our students, when they finish year 12, will either get a QCE or a QCIA. And that is the document that the state gives a student that says you have successfully completed year 12 against the criteria that the state has created for a year 12 student exiting high school. And so there's a bunch of rules around QCE. QCIA is designed for students who have some learning challenges. That means that achieving a QCE might not be completely viable, and so there's a way to get individual achievement certification if, for whatever reason, a QCE is not a viable option for a student. And so there's a whole bunch of rules around getting the credits for a QCE. We're not going to talk about a lot of them tonight because year 10 in particular doesn't count towards a QCE. Okay, so there's not a whole lot of point in going into all the details about QCE until it starts to count, and we'll drip feed that information over year 10 and into year 11. Essentially, the rule is at a high level, you need 20 credits. You get those credits by successfully completing units of work in year 11 and year 12. 1 unit of work is worth 1 credit, and you need to accrue 12 credits from units of work that you have completed in the same subject from the beginning of year 11 to the end of year 12, and 8 credits from anything else that is credit worthy. That's the high level criteria. And what we do is make sure that most of our students are getting well over 20 credits. And so by the time you include religion and ethics into the mix, and any cert courses and other qualifications that students might get, we have some students leaving year 12 with, like, Carol, what's like the record, like 38 or something like that? Yeah, it's ridiculous, some of the credits that can be accrued. So that's the QCE. Yes, it's important, but it's important once students start year 11, and it's important where we're changing subjects. We want to make sure that by changing a subject at a certain point in the year, we're not sacrificing a QCE point unnecessarily. Sometimes you have to, and that's okay. But we want to just make sure that when we're changing subjects in year 11 and year 12, we're not unnecessarily sacrificing a QCE point when we don't have to. And we have very few students that get to the end of year 12 where we are having to really, really manage their QCE points because they're in jeopardy of not getting the QCE certificate. So we try to set that up as best we can. All right, the ATAR. So this is the pathway that many students take. It's the pathway that universities use to accept students straight from high school, but it's really important that you understand it's not the only pathway. And so depending on what information you watch, you'll see that most students get an ATAR and go into university. That trend is actually changing every year. ATAR is becoming one pathway, but many universities might use an ATAR as a threshold, but you still have to do a bunch of other stuff to actually get in. Sometimes that's a portfolio of work, sometimes that's an interview, but also understand that you can get to university about, I don't know, I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but I was going to say 6 other ways. It's probably 4 other ways that actually don't require this ATAR score. So the pathway to university is actually quite diversified. This is just the way that Australia uses to get a large group of students transition from high school to university. And so we're going to watch a 3-minute video. It's going to explain a few things. It's probably going to raise some questions, but we can knock those over in question time.
The ATAR, or Australian Tertiary Admission Rank, is a standardised ranking system used to determine eligibility and competitiveness for university admissions for current Year 12 students. Although it may look like a score out of 100, your ATAR is a number between 0 and 99.95 that simply ranks how students sit in comparison to their state or territory's year group. So an ATAR of 80 means that you're in the top 20% of people you started Year 7 with in your state or territory. An ATAR issued in one state or territory is equal to the same ATAR issued in another and can be used to apply to universities throughout Australia. Each state and territory's admission centre has a unique way of calculating their students' ATAR. However, generally, during the final years of secondary school, Australian students undertake a range of subjects. In each eligible subject, students will receive scores based on their performance. These typically comprise of an internal assessment score from work completed at their school and a final exam score from an externally set and marked exam that students complete at the end of the year. To ensure the reliability and consistency of marks between schools, a student's assessment score from their school is put through a process of moderation. In some states, the raw scores are adjusted based on the performance of everyone at the school in the final external exams. While the exact calculations differ between states, generally, if a student's school as a whole performs better in the exams than their assessments, their assessment marks will be increased. In other states, external assessments are quality assured through a separate process and results do not impact their school assessment result.
That's
to account
Queensland.
for differences between subjects, a student's mark is put through the process of scaling. This creates a level playing field between all of the subjects, regardless of the difference in content and the level of competition within the subject. To use chemistry as an example, authorities look at how every student who did chemistry performed in chemistry compared to how they performed in all of their other subjects. If the body of students that took chemistry performed well in all other subjects, then chemistry marks get scaled up. If the body of students that took chemistry performed poorly in all other subjects, chemistry marks get scaled down. Scaling is designed to simulate what your mark would be if all students in the state took that subject. After scaling, all of each student's marks are added together to form what's called an aggregate, and the entire state is ranked based on those aggregates. From that ranking, students receive their ATAR. For current Year 12 students, each university sets a minimum ATAR for each course. The cutoff score is the mark of the person with the lowest ATAR admitted to that course. Universities can also set a selection rank that is a student's ATAR plus any adjustment factors such as location of your school. Students will submit a list of preferences for courses they would like to take at universities, and they will receive an offer for the highest preference course for which they are eligible.
All right, so it didn't work to sort of give you a bit of info while the video was going there, but I was trying to point out that in our state, the external exam doesn't scale the internal marks. So you get a mark out of 50 or 75 from your internal assessments in Year 12, and then you write an exam that's either worth 25 or 50, and those are just added together. So there's no scaling of school marks in Queensland. There is scaling of subject marks, and think of it as level of difficulty, right? I think very few people would argue that physics is harder than, let's say, dance. I don't know, picking a couple of subjects. I mean, I can't dance, so I find dance extremely hard. But from an academic level of difficulty, we would agree that physics is harder than dance, and therefore if you get an A in physics and you get an A in dance, the physics is going to scale better for you than the A in dance will scale, right? That's the easiest way to think about it. And so scaling happens every year, it happens in every cohort, and you can't you can find trends, but you can't predict that because a subject was scaled a certain way in 2025, it's going to be scaled the exact same way in 2026, right? So we actually try not to really think about scaling for most of the conversations we have. It matters for the students who want to go into medicine, dentistry, and the sorts of programs that require an ATAR of 99 plus, right? It does matter because you won't get a 99 plus if you're not taking some of those subjects, right? And so for the majority of students, it's negligible and it really doesn't matter. We want you studying subjects that you're interested in. Okay. How do you get that? How do you get an ATAR at the end of year 12? You have to just follow one of 3 options in terms of the subject combinations you take, right? And we have a whole group of students every year that don't meet these requirements and therefore don't get an ATAR because they have a different pathway that is awesome for them and exactly what they should be doing. And so we don't worry about this. But to get an ATAR, you need to either take 5 of the general subjects, 4 of the general subjects in an applied subject, or 4 general subjects in some other cert course, some other accreditation. And if you meet that requirement, then you're eligible for an ATAR. And so for the students who this is important for, we want to make sure it's well understood. We want to make sure people understand what it is they can and can't do to stay eligible for an ATAR. But for a bunch of students, for really good reasons, this actually doesn't matter, okay? And you need to figure that out as you move through senior school. So I want to take a moment to ask our heads of English and heads of maths to come up, because this is a question, this is probably the question that comes up the most in our subject selection process, excuse me, and that is, which English should I choose based on how I'm going in year 9? Which maths should I choose based on how I'm going in year 9? And what are the reasons why you would choose a given English or maths subject? So I'm going to ask Steve Watson to come up first, our head of English, to talk about English, then Miss McKenzie, Cassie McKenzie, to talk about maths, and then we'll talk about actual subjects for 2027.
Hey everyone. So there's obviously 3 choices with your English line, and honestly, all 3 of these choices are very appropriate and very valuable for different students. Just depends on which pathway they're taking, but I'm just going to talk about them one after the other. Literature has, if you really like reading and you are creatively inclined, you are probably going to enjoy literature. In literature, you're going to do probably more reading of novels, more longer pieces in that way. You definitely get more creative opportunities in literature. And ultimately, it's, I guess, generally seen as something that you should aim for if you are doing well in English right now. Yeah? So general English, perfectly... Well, it's probably got a bit more variety about it. You tend to get more practical English skills through that. Different types of like public writing, public speaking, exams, but it'll be a variety of assessments and pretty much open, I think, to almost any of the current year 9s, I think could easily have a go at general English next year in year 10. Essential English, very much more vocational focus. That's where you've got workplace kind of learning, communication under those sort of circumstances. Absolutely fantastic if that's your pathway. But generally speaking, I would encourage everybody, because I think this is the challenge with English next year. I would encourage everybody to try and aim for the general and literature subjects primarily, because it's always possible, once you work out if it's not for you, to kind of, maybe drop down to essential English or drop from literature to general. It's not normally a problem. It's more difficult if you try and go the other way. Like trying to go up is a bit of a challenge once if you realize that suddenly, halfway through year 10 or year 11 that you really do want an ATAR and you really need to go up, it can be far more difficult because there's this number of skills that we develop in year 10 that, can be a bit harder to pick up once you start in essential. So I would encourage you, if you've got any inclination, give general a go, give literature a go. The sort of questions that I get asked, there's like multiple exams, no matter which way you go. There's public speaking, no matter which way you go. It doesn't matter if you do general English or literature, you're going to be doing a Shakespeare play. So these are the sort of things that shouldn't sway you one way or the other. Ultimately, you should look at your English mark and think like, well, is this something I'm enjoying? Is this something I'm doing well in? Talk to your teachers, particularly. They'll know far more about you in terms of what they think you're capable of. And also just, more than anything else, just think about what you enjoy, because that's where you're going to thrive. Thank you.
Evening, everyone. I'm Mrs. Mackenzie, Cassie Mackenzie, and I'm talking to you this evening about the maths options that you have. Also, 3 choices. So you've got your math methods, general maths, and essential maths. We have done some streaming this year in Year 9, as you all know, and we have got like the problem solving and reasoning type level with Miss Rowland's class, and then Mr. Pina and myself have the, it's not even mid-range because we're still doing a lot of extension work in those classes. So that's more that general math methods type of end of stuff. And this term, actually, all the students are experiencing foundational concepts for our math methods. So it's our hardest term for the year, and it's actually just trying to encourage the students to consider what pathway do they want to go, how serious are they about maths, and is math methods something that they're interested in. So we're looking at quadratics and index laws and all that sort of stuff this term, all the fun stuff. So math methods is your advanced algebra and calculus type concepts. And that is pathways such as engineering, medicine. There's actually, even if you're interested in electrical trade, Energex actually would like you, if you're interested in electrical trade and you want to get into something like a company like Energex, a big company, they actually highly recommend math methods as well. So yeah, there's lots of pathways for math methods. General maths is also tertiary entrance level of maths, really, but it's got a bit more financial maths, a bit more general maths concepts. And then our essential maths is an applied subject. It's actually a really good course. I actually really like the essential maths course. It's very real world focused. There's a lot of financial maths in there, a lot of measurement in there. Essential maths, we typically say, is if you're looking at going into a trade or doing some TAFE courses, depending on what TAFE courses, essential maths is your go. However, please note too that electrical, they strongly encourage general maths entry because obviously in the electrical side of things there's quite a bit of maths in there. So you want to, although general maths doesn't typically teach the maths that's for electrical, it is, you need to be able to do that level of maths to be able to succeed quite well when you go on to do your studies. It is possible still in some cases to do essential maths, but it's just highly recommended that general maths is your pathway for that. There is another maths that's not up here as well, and that is your option of taking on the elective of specialist maths, which I really encourage you to do, especially if you're loving the math method side of things. So specialist maths is one of our electives. We've got, I think it's 17 students taking specialist maths this year in Year 10 because it's an awesome program. And what students often say is that our math methods is actually harder than specialist maths. That's not because the content's harder, it's because the amount of content in math methods that you learn is a lot heavier. There's a lot more in that, and that actually helps you to succeed in specialist maths. So they tie in beautifully together. So definitely consider that as your elective. I think I've covered it all. I'll speak a little bit into the grades as well. Again, I hate locking it in and saying you need to be getting an A to be able to to do math methods, because obviously at grade 9 level our brains are still growing. So we've got to have that growth mindset. But in math methods, you'd ideally be looking at currently getting an A or a B. General maths, you'd be looking at getting a B, C range, and essential maths, that C and below range. But it absolutely depends on your pathway. And like Mr. Watson said, it's harder to move up, okay? So if you're thinking, oh, I'm just not sure between the general and essential maths, you're better off having a go at general maths while you're coming into Year 10, and you can swap down easily. But it's much harder to start at essential maths and move your way up. Okay, so I really encourage you to do that as well, to aim for your best. Even if you're not sure what your career pathway is, have a look at your career pathway, have a chat to your maths teachers, absolutely. But yeah, aim for your where you think you might have some challenge, and you can always swap back down if need be. Thank you.
Okay. If you still have questions about maths and English, Mr. Watson and Miss Mackenzie are going to be here after our presentation, and you can ask them directly and give them some context for your young person and hopefully get an answer. So I'm going to show you the 2027 subject lines, right? So these are the lines that you will have access to, that in a few weeks' time you will be choosing a subject from each line to study. I need to give you a little bit of context to this, in that you have to understand that timetabling is one of the most difficult mathematical tasks you can do, full stop. So if you love maths and you want to, actually have impact in the world, timetabling is one of the spaces you will be employed in. Train timetables, plane timetables, airport timetables, bus schedules, and school timetables, right? And so we have to understand that there is no way that we can make every single student happy with subject lines. Somebody is always going to be disappointed. And because we have the offerings we do, we are constrained in a lot of ways that have nothing to do with what a young person really wants to study. So things like needing a specialist teacher, needing a specialist room, resourcing for a subject. And so we have spent a lot of years analyzing trends, looking at data, figuring out what lines over the years works well and doesn't work well, where student interest seems to be, what subjects tend to compete. And you can't ever get it absolutely right, but we're at a point where we're pretty confident that the lines we're sharing with you tonight are really well balanced for the majority of students and allow students to make some really great choices for a pathway across all of the elective lines, okay? And so this is gonna go up and some of you straight away are gonna go, oh, I can't do my top 2 subjects, right? I'm sorry, I am. If I change it, guess what? Somebody else is gonna go, oh, now I can't do my top 2 subjects, right? And so in timetabling, a 10% error rate is actually considered amazing. That means a cohort of 100, 10 kids have clashes in their top subject choices. That's actually a really great result. It means 90 kids got pretty much what they wanted. So I just need everybody to understand the complexity of this. And so when we see this, it really isn't a case of, I'm going to send an email and get them to change the lines because my child didn't get what they want. It is almost totally unlikely, but I won't say completely unlikely, that that will happen, okay? There are a couple of subjects where we have already intentionally placed because we know what students want, and we have some flexibility because there's a very small number of students doing the subjects. But for the most part, for 99.5% of the conversation here, these are set. So I encourage you to come have a conversation. I would love to hear from you if you're not happy. I encourage you to come tell me that this didn't work out for you, because then we know, right? I just don't want to get your hopes up that it's somehow going to change. Does that make sense? All right. Are we ready? Here are the subjects for 2027. These will get sent out. You can take a photo of them, but these are the subject offerings on each of the lines for you to choose from. And so you can see that line 1 and 2 are your English and math lines, and you're going to be choosing a subject from each of those. And then lines 3, 4, 5, and 6 are elective lines, and they may look unbalanced because of the color coding, but if you actually count the number of different types of subjects, it's a really balanced scenario, okay? I want to point out a couple of things around funding. Anything in blue requires funding, and so you have to remember that if you're doing an apprenticeship or a traineeship, and that's happening, then you can't dip into VETIS funding to do a certificate course, which means the blue courses, all of them, if you're doing a traineeship or an apprenticeship, the blue courses are fee for service. So we showed you the fee schedule, and that would be a choice you make, knowing that there's a cost per fortnight, per month, per year, depending on how you want to cut that down. If you're not doing a traineeship or an apprenticeship, and you haven't used your VETIS funding for anything else because you're not doing a Carol, give me an example, a Cert 2 in electrotechnology at trade training or something like that, which uses VETIS funding. If you're not doing that already, then you have access to use your VETIS funding for some of the blue courses, right? So engineering skills and rural ops, agricultural practices, they're VETIS funded. I'll talk about ICT and innovation in a second. They are not on the VETIS funding list, and so they are a fee for service no matter the scenario that you might be in the courses you're taking, right? And I want to point that out because if you love engineering skills and you really want to take it, you can use your VETIS funding for that. But now that you've done that, if you also love innovation and you want to start your own side hustle in year 10, 11, and 12 and take it to market and try to have a little revenue generator for yourself, you can't do both of those without paying for one of them. And you'd pay for the innovation one because it's the cheaper, it's the non-VETIS funded one. But if you wanted to do engineering skills and rural ops, those are both VETIS funding. You can only use funding for one. You've got to pay for the other, right? If you only want to do ICT or innovation, those aren't on the VETIS funding list, so those are a fee-for-service course, right? The other course that's not on here because we don't offer it in year 10 is the Diploma of Business. It starts in year 11, but it is not a VETIS funded course. That is a fee-for-service course that you pay for if you would like to do it, okay? And so in 4 weeks' time, we're going to be asking you to make some decisions on what you want to study. We're going to spend the next few weeks in PC watching some videos for each subject to make sure that students have all of the information they need to make these decisions. We're going to be sending those links to parents. We're going to be providing very, very soon our senior subject handbook, which has all of the information about all of the subjects in it. And so we're in about a 4-week window where we're trying to give you as much information as we can for you to make the best decision possible. But when it comes down to it, if you had to make it really, really simple, we want you to take subjects that you really are interested in. Regardless of what pathway they lead to, you will be more engaged, you will learn more, you'll become a better good person who does good things if you're doing things that you're interested in, right? And so, so we really want you to pick based on interest. Now, obviously with fee-for-service courses, if there's a challenge to be able to afford that, we've always looked at fees and fee structures on a case-by-case basis based on affordability. So that's just a conversation you have with us to let us know that there's a challenge there, and we'll look at each individual family and their circumstance and make decisions accordingly. We'll come back to this at the end of the night. We'll put it back up, and that allows us to have conversations and ask questions, but I'm going to move on from it just for a couple more slides. So this is the process in a nutshell for the next 4 weeks, okay? The senior subject handbook, we're hoping will be available next week, or hopefully early, but it might be mid to late next week. That's for parents and students to access, read everything they can or want to about all of the subjects. We're going to be watching specific subject videos in PC, in pastoral care class, each morning, and we're going to spread that out over a few weeks, so we're not watching video after video after video and tuning out. And then we're giving you time for questions and conversations where you can go talk to a head of department, a specialist teacher. You can come see myself or Carol or Jane in Future Pathways, or talk to the English and Maths HODs or Mr. K. And then we go to the survey. We collect that data. This is the point in time where you say, these are the subjects I want to take. We then allocate subjects to a student, and we look at numbers, we make choices. If a subject only gets 2 students, it likely doesn't run. And we communicate that. We work with those students to pick another subject. Actually, I did forget to mention, you'll see on line 5 that there's industrial tech skills and engineering skills, and the fine print says this will run if it receives a higher number of students than the other one. And that's because we aren't sure where the interest is for engineering skills now that it is a fee for service for some students versus industrial tech skills, and we don't have the resources to run both. So this is the best way that we can make a decision without guessing. If engineering skills gets more numbers on that line, it'll run. If industrial tech skills gets more numbers on that line, it'll be the one that runs. And so when students are choosing, they need to know that if they're choosing engineering skills on line 5 and it doesn't end up running, they'll then have to make a choice to be considered for engineering skills on line 3 because that's the only place it's running, and vice versa for line 4 and 5 with industrial tech skills. We do have limited numbers in ag practices and in engineering skills, and so it is quite possible, and we've had to do this already for ag practices, which leads to rural ops, where I think we had 38 students that applied for, or that wanted to do ag practices. We only have 20 spots. And so it then becomes an application and an interview process. And I interview all the students based on what their interest is, what their pathways are looking like, and we have to make choices about who gets in and who doesn't. And that can be a hard thing to do sometimes, but it's where we're at because we just can't offer it in more than one place. Okay, at least for ag practices. For engineering skills, if the interest is there, we can run it on both lines, and so we'll have to see how that goes. So just be aware that there is some nuance to that particular set of subjects when we get to subject selections. So we don't necessarily communicate to everyone what their subjects are for next year because you've made the selection. So if you don't hear from us, you can assume that you got your subject. If for some reason you made a selection and you didn't get it, then you would hear from us. But we don't send an email out saying, hey, these are your subjects. You should know that based on the selections you made. Okay. What if my child wants to do something that isn't part of that 6-subject pathway? So a Head Start course, an apprenticeship, some other alternative pathway, that's awesome. Let's talk about it and let's figure it out. Carol and Jane, amazing Future Pathways team, and myself and Carol and Jane and Bert work really closely together to make sure that we're providing pathways for all students based on what they want to do. So yes, it's possible, and you might be off campus for a day. Some students are off campus for 2 days, and we manage their timetables and make the best decision we can so that they're catching up on work, and they're maybe not studying as many subjects because they're doing something off-site, either an apprenticeship or maybe a cert course off-site or something like that. So we can have that conversation, and we will make a very unique pathway for any student who requires it and has good reason to do it. So we do have some guidelines. So if you want to drop a subject particularly in year 10, we're pretty careful about allowing students just to drop a subject and have what we call a study line. So there has to be a really good reason for it. And so again, it becomes about a conversation. What is your particular pathway? What is your interest? How are you getting there? What do you need to do in year 10 that if you didn't do it in year 10, you wouldn't get there in year 11 and 12? And then we allow for those pathways to take place. Sometimes we'll have students come and go, I work at KFC and I can do a Cert 2 in hospitality, and so I need to drop a study line. And we'll go, no, you're not going to do that because you can do a Cert 2 in hospitality starting in year 11 and 12 and finish it completely without any issue. There's no reason for you to drop a subject in year 10 to do that. So it really just depends on what it is you're trying to do. Okay, I want to talk about 2 courses quickly that are new. One is brand new, one is new this year. Just to put it in front of you because it's just not as known as some of the other subjects that most people have been studying in an elective in some form in middle school. So the first one is our ICT pathway. This is a really difficult one for us over the years because when they changed the system in 2020, they actually took away some subjects that were brilliant subjects for this technology pathway, and they replaced it with one subject that was very programmer heavy and not really a great subject for an ICT pathway in general. So we ran that for a bit, the numbers weren't high, and even the kids who loved ICT didn't love that particular subject. So we got rid of that subject and we offered the applied subject. But the issue with that is that we have some kids who are looking at an ATAR pathway, wanting an ATAR pathway, and that applied subject just doesn't go well with them for the ATAR calculation. And so it's like, what do? We don't want to go back to the subject that we had offered because we know that's not going to work. So we've landed on a qualification. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. If you can leave school with a nationally recognized qualification that makes you more employable, that is awesome. And that is beneficial to anyone for any pathway. So our new Cert 3, Cert 2 in Applied Digital Technologies and Cert 3 in Information Technologies is an awesome opportunity, and it's a brand new offering. And so if you like the ICT industry, if you like gaming and website design and graphics and building computers and data infrastructure, all that sort of stuff, it's all part of this program, and you get a qualification. And so we want you to be aware of it because it is totally brand new, and I think for those who are looking at following some pathway in that industry, this is great. For the students who are maybe looking for a high ATAR, and they're particularly academic students, they can take 5 academic subjects and get a qualification. For those students who aren't so worried about the academic pathway, they can do other subjects, practical subjects, and still get this qualification, which is great. And it's really not expensive. $580 for the whole thing is great value for a qualification. The Cert 2 and 3 have QCE points attached to them, so you are also adding to that QCE credit bucket by studying a certificate course. The other course I want to talk to you about is Innovation Pathways, and I totally have to admit bias here because I run this program, and so please understand that when I'm talking about it from a place of passion, not because I'm trying to sell it more than anything else. So I just want you to be aware of it. It is new because we've been running a program for 10 years, had been running a program for 10 years called the DeLorean Project, and that was a mandatory program that happened in year 10 for all year 10 students. And for a whole bunch of reasons, that program was wrapped up last year, and we've developed a whole new program to replace it that actually is an elective subject, but it runs over the whole course of year 10, 11, and 12. And so the information is there. What I love about this course is that you're not only getting 8 QCE points to go into that QCE bucket, but you are getting an ATAR just by doing the Cert 4. And so you get an ATAR between 75, well, I'm going to say 75. 78 is possible, but at the moment we're not seeing that at most universities. And so an ATAR of 75 is the average ATAR in the country. It's the ATAR that gets you into the majority of programs in most universities. And so just by completing Cert 4, you get an equivalent ATAR. You don't have to do anything else. How good is that? You're getting a nationally recognized qualification, you're getting an ATAR if you need it, and you're getting QCE points. But more than that, the whole thing is designed around starting your own business and getting something to market. Find a problem, find a solution, take it to market, monetize it, and we just try to take away the barriers, and by doing that, you get a qualification. So if that's something that interests students, then I think you should definitely consider looking at innovation. It is fee for service. It's not Vetis funded. I think it worked out, if I remember, about $30 a fortnight is what it cost over year 11 and 12. Year 10, in both of these subjects, don't have a cost to them. They're our program, so you can take both innovation and ICT in year 10 at no cost. It's the Cert course that starts at the beginning of year 11 that then is a fee for service, right? So if this is something that interests you, you're in luck. I'm here tonight. Come and chat with me, and we can have a conversation about it. The subject change process. It's really worth talking about this just so you know that the process is different from middle school. I'm not going to spend a lot of time at this at all. Just know that there's a Google form on Gateway. You have to talk to teachers to make your subject change. Once you've spoken to teachers, submitted the form, it's a workflow that happens automatically where emails go to the teachers involved, they approve it. It then goes to the Future Pathways team that looks at these things we need to track around QCE and ATAR eligibility. It then comes to me for final approval. The main thing that I just want to reiterate now, you're going to hear this over and over again, you cannot go to subjects that aren't on your timetable. If it's not on your timetable, you shouldn't be there. So if you're making a subject change, you're checking your timetable until it changes to the subject you want to be in, then you can go. Okay? I'll leave it at that. Mr. K is going to talk briefly about reporting, because reporting in senior school is different and can look really confusing. So we're going to finish on this, and then we're going to have time for some questions and conversations.
Awesome, thank you very much. Now, reporting, to a certain extent, some of you will have this already, but I think it's way more important in senior school. So you will have an app on your phone, and we've got live reporting. So every time, so if we can go to the next slide, in live reporting, the teacher will release a student's mark with a comment. The moment it's released, you as a parent can get that mark on your phone, and you know what happens instantaneously. You don't have to wait until we publish that report, which is the next slide. And the report that we publish is once a term, but that is way too late to start intervening. So if you keep an eye on the app, you will know what a student is getting live as it happens. Now, we publish these reports once a term and once a semester, as well, just to keep you informed. But if you kept an eye on those marks as they started turning over, you would already be informed. Now, there is one tricky bit about senior reporting, and I'm going to show you the next slide, because this is quite complicated and it is not intuitive. So you will see there's your 10 right at the top, and you will see PIA1, PIA2, PIA3, PIA4. The P is for preparatory internal assessment. So this is to prepare you for the senior program. So in term 1, you do PIA1. In term 2, you do PIA2. And at the end of those 2 terms, you get a report with PIA1 and PIA2. Then in term 3, you will do PIA3 and sometimes PIA4, because what will happen is in term 4's report, you will get PIA3 and PIA4 on that semester report. But we actually start the next year's work 1 term early. Most private schools on the Sunshine Coast and across Queensland do this, where we start year 11 work in term 4 of year 10. So technically you're in year 11. The assessment you do then, which is FIA1, which is Formative Internal Assessment 1, you will only see on your report card at the end of term 1 of year 11. Then, at the end of term 2 of year 11, you've got FIA1 and FIA2. And then in term 3, you are going to do FIA3 and FIA4, but only see that on your report in term 4. It is complicated, isn't it? Then in year 11, term 4, we already start your year 12 work. So you need to have, by that time, all your subjects finally selected, because when you start year 12 work, you cannot change your subject ever again until the end. So then you go through term 1, term 2, and term 3, and there you have SIA1. I see there's a mistake on that one. SIA1 is Summative Internal Assessment. So those should all be SIA1. Summative Internal Assessment 1, 2, and 3. That's your internal mark. Out of 50 or 75, we send those marks to the government. They check our marking, let us know whether that's correct marking, and then right at the end, in term 4, you sit an external exam that the Queensland government sets, and you actually, we don't see those marks, you don't see those marks, they are marked by the QCAA, and only when they are published do we see them and you see them right at the end. So that is the bit of the complicated nature, but if you are on the app and you're watching the live reporting, you'll be able to be up to date all the time, and that's the time to jump in if you start worrying about that. Thanks, Mr. Steffler.
I just want to go back to this slide because I failed to talk about Diploma of Business, which some of you might have been wondering about. It got mentioned. So I want to quickly talk about Diploma of Business because you don't see it on this, these elective lines. So with the Diploma of Business, we don't offer it at all in Year 10. And then what we start to do towards the end of Year 10 is our Future Pathways team, and start doing this. If I'm getting it wrong, please, ladies. The Future Pathways team starts to put out a request for students interested in the Diploma of Business, right? Diploma is the step above the Cert 4. It comes with, does it come with QCE points? 8 QCE points and an ATAR of 80 up to 83. 87 in some universities, right? So you do that, you've got an ATAR, you've got QCE points, you've got a qualification. Oh, right, okay. Yeah, so we'll get that information out around the diploma offerings, but I just wanted to point out that it's not an option in Year 10. If you love business, I have a student right now who's doing the general subject business, the Diploma of Business, and the Cert 4 in entrepreneurship and new business. Clearly, you've got to love that subject to do all those things. She's got ATAR ranks coming out her ears just by doing the diploma and the Cert 4. She doesn't need it all, but she loves it. So if the Diploma of Business is something that is of interest to you, there will be communication about that. We highly encourage you to be asking about that now. Come and see Jane and Carol in the Future Pathways office to ask what that's about. If you're wondering what the difference is between Diploma of Business and Cert 4 in Entrepreneurship and New Business, come and talk to us tonight. We can explain that as well. So that's the diploma. I just didn't want to miss that bit. All right. Does anyone have any questions that they think everybody would like to know the answer to? General questions. Happy to, I might come down because I can't see with the lights on. Any questions? If you have a question, there's a good chance someone else does. If it's specifically about your child, probably nobody else has that question. But if you have a question about subjects or some of the combinations or something like that, anybody willing to ask a question? That either means I did an amazing job or you are so confused you don't know what to ask. I'm going to assume that it's the former, not the latter, right? Last chance for questions for the whole group. All right. So from here, we encourage you to hang around. So we've got Carol McKee and Jane Hines from our Future Pathways office. So if you know that your young person is on a path to traineeship, apprenticeship, there's some cert courses out there that you know we don't offer but that they want to do. You're not sure about QCE or ATAR eligibility, you can talk to any three of us. Please hang around and have those conversations. If you're not sure about what English you should choose, Mr. Watson is here. If you're not sure about what maths you should choose, Ms. McKenzie is here. If you are interested in the design technology space, we've got industrial tech skills, engineering skills, design, and you're just not sure the difference and what you should choose there. Mr. Kirby, our head of design technologies, is here, so please have that conversation. And Ms. McEwen is here from our learning enhancement team to talk about what it looks like if you have a child who has some challenges that we need to support, and what that looks like through senior, because I must say it is different. When we hit year 11, we cannot modify any of the content. Curriculum in year 11 and 12 is what it is based on the subject you choose. There is zero modification allowed. So your child has to be able to complete that work. And if your child has a learning difficulty, like say something like dyslexia, that's a real challenge. We have plenty of kids with dyslexia that have successfully completed senior work. We just need to support them in a way that allows them to have that success. So please speak with Ms. McEwen if you have questions about that. And then Mr. K and I are here to answer anything else that falls outside of those buckets. And we encourage you to have those conversations, right? Starting next week, Year 9s, you're going to start seeing videos every day in PC. Each of the videos is for a subject. They talk about Year 10, 11, and 12, why you would choose that subject, what you're going to study. And so it's important that even if you have an idea of what you want to take, you still pay attention to those subject videos. That'll take us 3 weeks, 1 or 2 videos a day in PC to get through. If parents have questions when the handbook gets emailed out to you early next week, then you can come and see us, send emails. We can have a phone conversation. You can come in and have a meeting in person if you really aren't sure. Or if you have a really unique case, we've got a student in Year 10 who's already doing distance ed for language, and we want to support any and all of those pathways. So communication is key here, and then we'll then let all of you know when we're going to do the subject selection. So we bring all the students together, and we do the subject selection together in class, but we'll let you know when that's happening. It's really, really important that when we communicate that date, that as much as possible you make sure you're here for that. We don't do time stamping, so you don't get preference for a subject because you submitted first before someone else. It's just important that you're here so that you're making the best decision you can on the day, because those decisions are what we then look at to make decisions around whether a subject runs or whether it doesn't based on the numbers. So we don't want students just going, I don't care, I'll do this, this, and this. We want you to make choices for your pathway, for your interest, and for the thing that you want to get out of the 1.5 years of full-time work that you're about to do. Sound good? All right, we're here to chat. We'll stay for half an hour or an hour if we need to. So please, we'll probably spread out. I'll stay in here. Maybe Mr. K and I will stay in here with Carol and Jane, and then Mr. Watson, Ms. McKenzie, Ms. McEwen, Mr. Kirby, can you guys take the foyer? And that just allows people to sort of have some space. Thank you so much. Drive safe home. We'll chat with you, I'm sure.